welcome to Life Love Etc., a show that covers all aspects of life, relationship, and success. And I'm your host, Dr. Anna Elton. And tonight we have a special guest, Dr. Drema Hatuel. And she is an expert in relationships and parenting and everything that comes to attachment styles, family of origin. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I love talking about relationships. Myself a relationship therapist, so couples have a special place in my heart.
Mm.
So, we talk about couples, what did you see in your work and research? Why do you think couples reach out for couples therapy?
So, variety of reasons. I would say majority of the time, there's always something underlying. They'll come into therapy talking about a surface related issue or conflict, something that they're not able to get through on their own. But as we continue to get to know each other, majority of the time we're unpacking a lot more than what that issue was that they originally came in for.
Absolutely. So, when you think about your first session, and what do you think couples usually say? What is number one? And I'll tell you what I usually hear from my couples. But well, when you ask them, like, why are you here? What would you like to work on? What's our goal? What do they usually say?
So, what I hear a lot of times is intimacy, issues with intimacy, like different sexual drives. So, one partner might have a higher sex drive than the other partner. And I mean, with that being said, that's an unmet need, right? So, that's kind of, I mean, I hear that a lot. I would say that would probably be one of the main ones. Another big one I hear communication, right? One couple or one partner gets really upset because there's a lot of stonewalling going on,
Mhm.
and they want their partner to be able to learn communication styles or be able to get past that so that way they can talk and be able to communicate, feeling emotionally safe to communicate.
Absolutely. So I would say in my practice, communication usually number one, or like that's at least what they say they want to work on, right?
Hmm.
But there's always underlying issue, and then in many cases, intimacy comes up a lot, right? And when you look at the research, the main reasons why couples fight, number one is finances, which makes sense, right?
Hmm.
We all people need to cover their expenses, and sometimes they can be on the same page, and then we know about the financial infidelity, right? When couples can be financially transparent with each other. So number two is intimacy, and number three tie parenting, in-laws, or chores, fair
Hmm.
share of chores.
Yes, I do. I hear all of that. All of that.
So, from your work with couples, is there something that you learned from them? Is there something that stood out? Is there something that you were teaching them and by default applied in your own relationship? Or something you actually, tried on your husband first, and then you brought to your couples and say, like, well, I know it's working. So here's a technique.
Yes, yes. Communication skills is number one. I've been practicing modeling it to my husband for years, hoping he'd pick up on a lot of things. And over time, I think it's worked. So I will share that with my couples when I work with them in therapy because I want them to know that personally. It's the grass isn't greener on the other side, even as an expert in the field, right? We still have to practice what we preach. So I will share some stories, some minor stories, just to let them know personally that this is okay. It can be conquered with that teamwork approach, and it's really about how it's communicated.
So, when you talk about communication, what do you usually see? Is there a particular dynamics that you see, for example, pursuer, avoider, or like anything else? Like, what usually the biggest challenge for couples when they can't communicate?
I think I'm going to go to Gottman here because he talks, I mean, exactly what he talks about, those communication patterns. I see them almost in every relationship. Maybe not all of them being used, but at least one in each relationship. And they're not even sure that they're using it, right? So the first thing I tell my couples is to buy the book. Let's explore it. Let's learn together. That way they can gain that self awareness of, wow, when I give this silent treatment, is what we know it to be, I'm actually stonewalling, and now they can look at and read the negative effects that comes from stonewalling
Mhm.
or criticism, how that's under aggressive communication. Sometimes a partner doesn't realize it, but they might be rolling their eyes. It could be something very minor, right? But that could be pretty meaningful or impactful to that entire dynamic. So that's one approach that I really like to take, is that educational approach. Let's start off with just reading and looking into Gottman together and learning about at least these communication patterns.
So when you learn with, sharing the knowledge with your clients, and when they read about all these techniques, are they able to say like, "Oh, we're actually doing this," or they saying, "Well, all these couples are doing it, but I'm okay. I'm never criticizing my partner. I'm never stonewalling my partner, even though if they're actually doing it, maybe even in session in front of you."
Yes, and we call that defensiveness, right? Which is another one of Gottman's communication styles. So, and I won't, I don't ever come off by saying this is what you're doing starting off. I want to become the unit. I want them to be able to trust me
Hmm.
prior to me saying anything that they need to work on. I just take what they want to work on and I'll grow with them. Within time, once I become a part of that unit and we're laughing together and they're sharing things about their week, their short successes that they wanted to share with me because I'm a part of the unit, that's when I'll say, I'm wondering if there was a different way that you could have approached that. Let's talk about that. And then let's look at those two different ways. So this sounds like a more positive approach. And now let's look and see what this approach actually was. And that's where they can gain that knowledge of like, wow, that is under being critical or
So they
condescending or right.
so they're able to see the patterns, right? Because with
Yes,
couples,
yes.
usually they create certain patterns, and then if they're not addressed, they will continue the patterns after 1 year of marriage, 10 years, 20 years, right? And then if they're able to see and know how to break the pattern, they hopefully can create healthier dynamic in a
Yes,
relationship.
exactly. Yes. And I love to see that unfold with them doing it, right? Not so much of me saying, here's your homework assignment. I want you to do this week. I love seeing that they're like, hey, you know what I noticed this week about myself? And that's when you notice that growth and change happen quickly.
So when couples feel stuck, right? When they feel like they put in the work but nothing is changing, when they have the same dynamic. So let's say when they start talking and then they start to escalate, what do you usually do? Is
When
there
they start to
any,
escalate in session or when they come to me and tell me about
just
them.
tell you that like, hey, we tried to have this conversation, but it just didn't end anywhere, right? We got upset again. One would start maybe yelling, or like another one would shut down. So what would you do? Like, what would be your advice to this couple?
So I would say it depends on what stage in therapy I'm at with them. If we're just starting and they don't have the skills yet, then I'll talk and educate on skill building and what are some steps that we can do when we get to that point of escalation. But if they already have the skills, then it's more so is what's that underlying reason that caused you to get from a 1 to a 5, and why weren't we able to stop at a 2 or a 2.5, right? So what skills are you not implementing,
Mhm.
whether it's communication skills, coping skills, any type of calming technique, what's not being used that caused you to get to the 5. And then also, like I said before, that underlying reason, we need to get to the bottom of the root.
So, what do you usually see when you think about family of origin or like attachment styles? Is there any particular, I guess, examples that you can use, right? If you say like, well, anxious attached
Mm.
clients will, do this usually, or avoidant clients will do this, or this is how the healthy attachment may look like.
Yes, I love to explore that, right? Because that really comes from our upbringing and family dynamics majority of the time. So when we look at an individual that might be using more of an avoidant type pattern, where there's maybe a fear there, or more of a passive type personality where instead of being able to discuss or talk about it, they'd rather let's just sweep it under the rug and hope that this doesn't come up again in the future, which we know doesn't work.
Hmm.
So you will see a lot of conflict when you have one that maybe even secure attachment, one with anxious, or if you have avoidant and anxious, those patterns, they're very challenging to be able to work through together, because then you have that anxious partner that's, I want the solution right now. I can't wait. I want to be able to solve this immediately. And the avoidant one is running out the door. So,
So that's where we go back to Gottman's avoider and pursuer dynamic, right? One will pursue and one would avoid.
mhm.
And from attachment style, usually, right? And again, not always, but usually we have the anxious person will be the pursuer because they want to have a solution right here and then, right? Because if the partner will walk away, they will feel abandoned, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then also, and they want certainty, right? They want to know the answers. I guess another thing that I've been seeing that like if we don't solve this right now, I don't know if we ever will come back to this conversation because it's always like we swipe it under the rug, right? So that's why I want the solution now. But then the second partner could be avoidant one, right? Because they just can't handle the conversation or they don't want to talk about it, right? So I know I was continue talking to myself, but what I was saying that they could be the avoidant attachment style, but also they may be even a secure attachment style, but they simply can't be in this conversation anymore because they can emotionally afford anything at that point, and they're outside
Mm-hmm.
of their window of tolerance. So
Yes.
that's one I usually say like take a break, bring yourself back down, and then reconnect.
Yes, absolutely. That break is very helpful to be able to regulate.
Because whenever it's outside of that window of tolerance we just go in circles and if one on the escalate then it doesn't take us anywhere.
Yes.
So when you think about communication, right? So you mentioned intimacy is the tough one that couples come in. Can they talk about intimacy at all, or do you feel like that's a really really tough topic that they usually bring to therapy because they simply don't even know how to start to talk about their desire? And
Hmm. So, an interesting pattern I've noticed is if I don't, which I have, addressed the question early on, they won't bring it up until they're actually both feeling very comfortable with me later. I mean, that's something I learned really in my doctoral internship, my doctoral postdocs when I did a lot of couples work, because I wouldn't either, right? That's
Mhm,
something. It's a very sensitive topic, and you want to gain that trust first before you bring it up. At least that's how I was approaching
mhm.
it. But now, years later, I have realized that that is something that we need to ask early on. And if they, and I can say to them, if you don't feel comfortable talking about this right now, that's okay. We have time. I'm here. I'm on your agenda. But at the same time, this is something important that I would like to touch on eventually.
And when you think of that intimacy, in terms of the sexless marriages, how many couples are in sexless marriages? And again, for our viewers, I just want to give the definition. So, what is the sexless marriage? It's 12, no, it's 10 or less times per year, right? It's about
Mhm.
once a month or less. So,
Mhm.
how many couples usually in sexless marriages, or what's usually the issue? Is it the frequency? Is it the connection, initiation, or something else?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I've seen all the above. I think I've seen a lot of issues with just they both are emotionally connected and the attraction is there, the emotional connection is there. It's just the sex drive is very different. So we have to address and talk about different ways to either find a healthy balance where one partner doesn't feel the pressure
Hmm.
and the other partner also feels like needs are being met. Other situations, a lack of the emotional connection or a buildup of underlying resentment that
Hmm.
hasn't been resolved, right? So then it's very common to not feel emotionally connected if you have a buildup of resentment and then you physically don't really want to give your body to somebody else. So I also see that a lot as well.
And in terms of the gender differences, would you say that mostly women would say that if they're not emotionally connected, they can be intimate with their partners, or do you feel like it's about half and half?
What I've seen, I wouldn't say half and half. I do hear it more so with women, but
Hmm.
I have heard it with men also. I think emotional connection is important for both. I feel like it depends on the person, personality traits. There's different factors, but I would say I see it more with the women
And when you think about emotional connection, what would be your first step advice to couples? Where do you think they can start to emotionally connect?
to feel emotionally
Yeah.
connected.
Hmm.
One, I mean, number one and foremost, communication skills, planning date nights with each other, making sure that those love languages are met, knowing what your partner's love language is. I know a lot of my couples, they come in, they don't even know what that is.
Hmm.
So that's important to understand. And I think that teamwork approach needs to be there, because if you're not feeling prioritized, you're not going to have the motivation to want to put your partner as a priority.
Yeah. So in terms of the love languages, what I've been seeing with couples, sometimes, especially when they struggle with intimacy, they're the opposite, right? For one partner, acts of service would be number one, and physical intimacy would be one of the last ones on the list, right? And for their partner, physical intimacy would be the top priority, right? And then other things are not as important. But what I also noticed with couples that they can actually take the test multiple times. And let's say if they took this test 5 years ago, they may not have the same love languages that would come up back then versus now. And the reason why it's not just one love language that we have, right? It's usually like you have a couple of love languages.
Mhm.
And then the one that comes up top, at least from my experience, what I've seen with couples is usually the one that's unfulfilled, right? That's why
Mhm.
you keep thinking about it, right? That's why you're saying, well, it's number one because this is what's been missing in my relationship.
Yeah, very interesting to see that. It's pretty cool too to give that test over and see what the difference is. I know too that there's love languages for children, like from parent role to
Mhm.
child role, and seeing what that looks like as well. So it can be used in other relationships.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And, sometimes when couples come in, they say, like, well, we took a test. And I always ask them to retake it right now. So we have,
Mhm.
what like their needs right now that are not being met. And so the way I usually use the love language test, I ask them to, go through each
Mhm.
and tell me how fulfilled or not unfulfilled each need for them.
I love that.
So that's why it's so interesting because sometimes they take the test and they don't know what to do with that. They're like,
Yeah.
okay, we took a test. Cool. This is my love language. You're not doing your part to fulfill my love language. That's why we're here. But then we also want to talk about maybe, it's somewhat fulfilled, right? And then if it's fulfilled somewhat, what is your partner's doing right? Even if you feel like they're not doing enough, but there's something. There must be something
Yes.
they're doing well.
Yes, that's great, because then you can point out the positive of what is happening, and that's where the acknowledgement can come in. So it's not just, hey, this is what you're not doing enough, but also let me acknowledge what you are doing.
Because I feel like in couples therapy, I mean, I guess at any point, anywhere, we tend to notice what's not going well, right? A lot of people have this negative mindset and lens, right? And then if we're looking for what's not being done, and that's the only thing we're bringing up, right? That's the only thing we're thinking about, right? And we're dismissing all the good things that are happening. And as
Yes.
Gottman says, it's the rule 5 to 1, right? So to cancel one negative, you need five positives, right? So and again, like I
Mhm.
know it's overachievement, right? 1 to 5. I feel like you need to start 1 to 1, right? If you notice something negative, can you point out what your partner is doing well?
Yes, exactly. Because you're right. I mean, a lot of times the focus is on what they're missing, not what they actually have right in front of them.
And I feel like the same thing happens with kids, right? Because you're mom yourself, right? I have 3 kids, and I know the theory, right? And that's why sometimes I'm trying to keep myself accountable, right? When I see my kids are not doing something for me, like, oh, they're not doing this again. But I was like, okay, I noticed that they, took the dishes to the dishwasher, they did this and this. And I know they haven't picked up. I have all boys. So, but I'm trying in my mind, so mental check-ins, right? I'm trying to remind myself, I noticed this, and this, and also say it out loud because if you only noticing that like what's not being done, then for kids it's also like, well, I've been trying but nothing is good enough.
Yes, exactly. We don't
And I
want
feel like for
those.
partners same thing, right? When they put in the effort and then their partners is not noticing, then it's almost like what's the point?
Hmm. Yes, exactly. Why keep trying if I just keep, getting pointed at for the things I'm not doing?
So when we think about so emotional connection, right? We need to communicate, we need to connect, we need to spend time together. What have you noticed with couples in long-term relationships? Do you feel like it's really easy or difficult or somewhat difficult to spend time as a couple again? What do you think is missing? Why do you think it can be difficult for them?
Difficult a lot of times is time and children. That's what I see a lot. If there's a
Mhm.
lot of other responsibilities that are getting in, I don't want to say getting in the way, but that are causing that challenge to be able to have that date night or make that time depending on their work schedules, I can see that being a really high conflict, right? Because it is really hard to get out and being able to trust somebody else with your kids. What I do tell my couples though is a date night doesn't have to be out. Once the children are in bed, you can have a date night on the comfort of your own couch, whatever that looks like, or sit outside on the patio, something that because you can bond anywhere. It doesn't have to be at a restaurant or in an external environment.
Absolutely. It's the intention, right? Attention and
Hmm.
intention.
Yes.
And I feel like so I did my research on technology, right? How technology affects relationships and then intimacy, communication, connection, and all that. And as we know that, a lot of couples say we don't have time, and absolutely, right? Working professionals, we have kids, and I totally can relate that like time is very limited. But what I notice within my family, right, the couples that I work with, they may not have time for each other, but they still have time for their phones, right? They still have time
Hmm.
for that half an hour in the evening to scroll through the phone
Hmm.
instead of connecting with their partners. So that's
Exactly.
where I always say, like, I totally get it. And, sometimes we need that doom scrolling just to turn off our brain and don't worry about anything in the end of the day. But if you need to be intentional with your partner, right? And then think about, like, even if it's once a week, can
Hmm.
you have a technology free night, right? Can you spend that half an hour intentional with your partner? Is there anything you used to do or use technology to your advantage, right? Maybe you can, watch a show together, or play a game, or whatever, whichever way you can connect together that night.
Yes. Yeah,
Maybe board
that's
game,
very true.
the couples like card game. I don't know, something.
Yeah. Yes, or split up that time if you do need that maybe 20 minutes of checkout time just to have your privacy be on your phone, then meet up with your partner after. There can be compromises with that too.
And so when partners spend time at home, like, is there any ideas that you usually give your couples, or like, is there anything that they come up with? What are some of the ideas at home? So let's say they don't have the childcare, but they still want to intentionally connect. Is there anything else they can do?
So I've just recommended they have these couples board games out that
Mhm.
you can play together. There's yeah, there's different types of card games. There's just, I mean, one thing though that I tell them just start with this before you do anything else is talk. I want you to talk about your week. My husband and I have our Friday date night. We've had it for 11 years now.
Mhm.
We met right before I got into the doctorate program, which is extremely intense and working at the same time. So I had to make sure that I scheduled some time where it was just that moment of connecting, and we both anticipated it, right? Like you knew it was coming. So I share that with my couples too. Like I get it, I understand, and that was before kids. Now with kids, I understand even more of that struggle. But the
Mhm.
first thing I say to them is just try at least once a week, or even if it's once every other week. If you can't get out, sit on your couch and start with just talking. Just talk about the weeks, share what's going on in your lives personally with your partner. Show that interest in what their lives look like when they're not home being a dad or a husband. So I think that's really important. I think those relationship check-ins are really important. And those are moments too that you can bring up like, hey, on Tuesday of last week, I didn't want to say anything. It just wasn't the right time, but I really didn't like what this text message. It came
Mhm.
off this way. I don't want to make any assumptions. Can we talk about it? Right. So that would be a good time to not just talk about the positives or about your week, but bring up some things that you might have been holding on to just based on not knowing the right time to bring it up. And then with that being said, end the week or end the night with watching a Netflix show. Or I have a couple of couples right now that are actually reading a book together,
Mhm.
and they enjoy that. They sit outside and read a book after the kids go to bed. Um, yeah, I mean that's really it. Watching a show, watching a movie, reading a book, playing some board games. But the first and foremost thing that is really important is that communication. Talk, just talk first, right?
Absolutely, because in long-term relationship, a lot of communication is transactional, right? What's for dinner? You want to be efficient, you want to be effective, you want to run the household, but then you forget to actually talk to each other.
Hmm.
And what I hear from couples that I work with sometimes that my coworkers know me better than my partner.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
And that's where so when I was doing research on communication, I came across the social penetration theory, which was developed in 1970s. And the way it works, it's like onion, peeling the onion. So when you meet someone, you start on the outer layer, right? You share your name, like what do you like to eat, your hobbies, right? And as you gain to know them on a deeper level, you talk about your dreams, your fears, aspirations, and things like that.
Mhm.
And that's when you really know the person. This is you get them, and then you get in this committed relationship, you get married, you start life together, and then you stop talking because you think you already know everything about your person. But it's actually wrong because people change.
Mhm.
They're not frozen in time, and that's important to continue that exploration and curiosity about your partner, not assuming, but just say like, hey, what do you like, what have you been up to, is there anything new about you? And I've been with my husband for 25 years. And I guess I still surprise him because I'm like, don't make assumptions, just ask me. And I know he knows a lot about me, but I think talking and, figuring out and sharing could be really interesting.
Yes, absolutely right. Because we're constantly changing. It's just so important to have those check ins. But I also share with my couples too, because a lot of people will say, well, marriage takes work.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be a negative concept though, right? Work
Hmm.
can be fun. Let's make it fun. Let's figure out what's exciting about your partner that has changed and change that, reframe that.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, if we're not having fun, what's the point, right?
Hmm.
So it's important to have love. And I feel like, some of the things that I, when I ask couples, so back when you were really satisfied, what was different versus now? And I think a lot of people actually said we were laughing a lot, we were having a lot of fun.
Hmm.
And I think
Yes.
that fun piece is the ingredient that needs to be brought back into relationships, right?
Yes.
And then for desire, I always say you need flirting, you need playfulness,
Mm.
right? You need to flirt with each other because when you're in long-term relationships, couples stop flirting. Sometimes they say like, I don't know how to do it anymore.
Yeah.
So and then that touch and hugs, right? And like a little flirting. I like the Legally Blonde, right? And she was showing like bend and snap, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, whatever makes you
Yeah.
laugh, whatever inside joke you have, right?
Yeah.
Whatever worked in the past, like try to bring it back into your relationship.
Yes, I love that. That's great guidance.
So as we start wrapping up our conversation here, is there one piece of advice that you would like to share with our viewers tonight? Is there anything that you learned that was extremely helpful, or something that you shared with the couples that you worked with recently?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a lot to think about. Let me think here. I think I would stick to that term that people say, we've been together for so long, they should know what I want, or they should know what I'm feeling, or they should know what I'm thinking. And that is, that's a myth in all couples and all relationships. They shouldn't know everything and they don't have to, right? And that's where I think the communication patterns start to really go downhill. So, I would say stay away from the assumptions like you just brought up, because no matter how long you've been with somebody, like you mentioned, 25 years is a long time. It's still not fair to make any assumptions. Like keep that curiosity approach active.
And your partner can be good at a lot of things, but reading mind may not be one of their skills, right? So
Yes.
always communicate and let them know what you need, what you want. And I feel like the biggest part, sometimes we don't know what we want and we're hoping our partners to guess.
Mm.
So we need to identify for ourselves what is the need, and then we can communicate it to our partners.
Yes, absolutely.
Clear, effective instruction,
Mm.
especially for men, right? So,
Yeah, specific.
so awesome. So, if anyone wants to reach out to you, if they want to work with you, where can they find you?
They can find me just on my Instagram, Dr. Hatuel, Hatuel, Hatuel. And I'm also on Psychology Today. So they can directly message me and I will message them back within 24 hours.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. You're absolutely amazing. Keep doing a
Thank
great job.
you.
I love working with couples. I know they're challenging, but I feel like I learned a lot. they teach me a lot. I learn a lot about myself, right? And then
Yes.
also, some of the skills I can, apply on my husband, see how it's working, and I can share
Yeah.
it with my clients. And as I always tell my clients, I've been with my husband for many years. We met before I went decided to be in psychology, so it's been a lot of testing, right?
Yes, the test runs are with him. He's your
So, but thank you for staying here tonight, and I will see you guys again in 2 weeks. Thank you. Have a
Okay.
great night.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Shot for the round and mid deploy. Ran up on my dollar, catch a slow eye.